tonight are Olympia Dukakis, Martin Sherman, and Alan Cumming. Can I just go down memory lane with you for a second?
Oh, this is fabulous.
This is fabulous. We're in a discrepancy as to how many years ago, because we're both in denial.
Yeah.
I think it's 8.
I don't think it's 8.
4. Anyway, we were younger.
Yeah.
But much more beautiful now, I think.
I think so. We've both blossomed with age.
Well, the lighting's improved.
Yeah.
So we're on an airplane.
You were in poor class then.
I was in the poverty class.
Yeah.
It was the beginning of my career. And of course, I'll end there too, where you watch the in-flight film like this. That was it. So suddenly there's an announcement.
I was in Posh.
He was in Posh because he was playing the voice of
Black Beauty. I was going to LA to do some dubbing on Black Beauty.
How did Black Beauty talk? Just refresh my
Like
memory.
me, just like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't do that because he tells a story.
You weren't flown over to do that?
Do that again.
So he's in the Posh. I don't know him at the time. And then the announcer says, you may have known, he said, what was his opener? Because I'm scared of flying anyway. His opener was, I've got some bad news.
Yeah, that was, I've got some bad news, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone goes, I said, we're going to have to land.
No, he said, you may have noticed, he was from the school of Ionesco. You may have noticed that the sun was on your right.
Oh, that's right.
Now you'll notice
No,
that
the
the sun
ice flows or something, wasn't
Not
it?
yet.
No, oh.
Sun now is on your left. You're jumping because you're in first class. You're going faster.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But back there we heard, so I thought, oh, has the world imploded? So he says, in other words, we're turning around. Can you imagine saying it that way?
Dun, 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 dun.
So I immediately run into first class because I think I want my name in the list. You know, like she went down in first class.
Titanic.
That's where we run into each other. They say somebody's had a heart attack.
And
So-
we're landing at Reykjavik Airport. So, we're like, oh, blimey. So we get off at Reykjavik Airport, and this is what cracked me up.
Wait a minute, you're going too fast because you're in
Okay.
first class. He
I
says,
think I'm going to eat while
eat.
this is going on.
Nosh, we'll get to you in a minute.
I'll come back and I'm sure I'll just pick up wherever you...
So the guy says, as a special treat, I'm going to take you down to see the tips of the iceberg.
Yeah, that was amazing, though.
Yeah, well, for you. For me, I was screaming. Then we land in Reykjavik.
And this is the worst bit. This is the most shameless bit.
Shameless.
Like, we go up the... Ruby grabs me and goes, come with me, and the camera people and everything, and they're from, and we go up the concourse of Reykjavik Airport, pointing at the salespeople who are wearing really funny sandals. And she's going, look at their sandals, aren't they funny? And the man's going over the camera like that, and these poor little Icelandic people don't know what has hit them. It was hilarious. And then we go back on the plane.
No, wait, before that.
Oh, what?
Wait, before that. It's just so fast, quick, life is quick.
I'm just trying to get into the
I'm like I got a 40-minute show to film, babe. I'm spreading it. First of all, in Reykjavik, there's nothing to buy, so the Americans are buying each other's belts. You know, because there's nothing, they're buying like, they're negotiating for their socks. Because the only thing to buy, you remember, is a dead seagull that you can twirl around on a piece of string.
I'd forgotten about that.
And recreate the scenery of Reykjavik. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, manure from a moose
Oh, stop it.
As an ornament.
as an ornament.
Yeah. That was fabulous. I forgot that.
Oh,
was
I
great.
bought it.
The seagull.
Come
Did
on,
you really
I
get
bought
it?
the manure harmonica. That's all I remember. Are you upgraded, Olympia? Because now, you know,
Yeah. no,
You're a macher?
That happens, right. I'm delighted, too. It's nice.
yeah, I bet to become famous when you're, what do you say, like later in your life, you really would enjoy it, wouldn't you?
Very
More?
much so.
You came from, where'd you come from?
Massachusetts.
Right.
Boston, Massachusetts.
Greek, clearly.
Greek-American,
Yeah.
first generation.
And your father was, what did he do for a living? Not a forester.
Well, it was always a mystery what he really did. Yeah, we never really knew. I know that when McCarthy came to town, my father disappeared for 3 months.
Oh.
So I thought that he worked at Lever Brothers.
Which is what?
Which was a
washing
big soap,
Soap.
makes soap, Lux and stuff like that, and in quality control, but I think it had something to do with unions. I don't know. We never really
So
found-
did he come knocking
I used to
and say-
ask, what do I put in the forms? You know, all the forms you have to write out to say what your father is. I was who her mother was. She was a housewife, you know. But I never knew what my father was. He was a lawyer. He was quality control. He was, we never knew, so it's hard to say.
Is he still alive?
My father?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
You
trust
didn't
me.
want to know? You know what I mean? Wouldn't you want to
Oh,
clear that one and say, I mean, was he a communist?
Well, I'd already been trained not to ask. My father would appear in strange places. Like once I was waitressing on Martha's Vineyard, and I looked up and I saw my father sailing by in a boat. And as the person
As
I
you
was,
do.
as my person I was with, I said, "That's my father." And he said, "Well, say something." I said, "No, no, he doesn't want." There was a way in which my father had a life, and you didn't intrude on it.
You know, you would think because Greek families are so close, suddenly, you know.
Mm.
Yeah,
Your
but
fa-
none if you're doing something undercover. Well, I think it's even harder to be married to someone who's carrying a huge secret all his life, and not a sexual one, but a political one or a social one. That's intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, is that strange with relationships to men for you? Do you know what I mean? That there's a certain area you don't, I don't know, impinge on or something. I mean, to me, it's a pretty oppressive beginning, considering what you've
Actually,
become.
I feel the opposite. I feel there isn't anything I wouldn't impinge on, but I am very determined not to be impinged upon this thing. I feel absolutely entitled to do it, but I don't feel that others are entitled to do it to me, so I guess maybe I have something of
Selfish.
my
You learned
father.
something from
Selfish
your
is the
dad.
word.
Yeah.
Selfish, right, selfish.
Were they like pleased that you decided to become an actress
Oh,
in,
no,
in the
they
midst
were.
of all? How did they try to
My
discourage
first
you?
show, I played the whore in La Ronde.
Who didn't start as a whore?
God.
You're still a whore.
Thanks.
That was it. And my father came to see me. That was the first time he came with my mother, and he couldn't speak. He was absolutely, solidly still. He would not. And I said to my mother, "What's the matter?" I had never even dreamed that that would offend him in some way or frighten him or whatever. She says, "Well, it's the part. He's just
You mean had you played,
a queen." I guess he would have.
he would have been pleased?
Well, I wouldn't have been so shocked. And I guess what shocked him was that I did it well.
And he thought, what did I
Yeah,
teach her?
Who is she? You know what's interesting is that for years I dined out on stories about my father. I thought, oh, it was very, very funny until one day somebody in a sensitivity group during the 70s. You remember the 70s and all
Asked?
the 70s?
Yeah.
No, these were
Sensitivity
7
groups.
sensitivity groups. Someone in the group confronted me and said, "Why are you always dining out on your father's house?" He says, "How do you really feel about your father?" And I was like,
What?
whoa, I was in a rage. I was in a
What
rage.
rage?
It hit me, yeah. Furious.
You mean you used him for shtick for a while, and then usually,
Yeah,
usually when you're obsessed
See
with
what I just did? We had a dinner conversation over my father and how unusual, and we laughed and we joked and stuff like that, and then I would do that, and then the day came when somebody called me on it, and I had to really acknowledge that I had some very deep feelings about this man and why I had not confronted anything and said anything.
I dined on my parents for
Yeah.
the first,
You
Oh,
did that
absolutely.
I saw that documentary you did with your mum and dad. That was amazing.
same thing though, it was really funny until, you know, somebody
Says,
what's your real feelings? When the door locks, you take out the tennis racket and destroy every piece of furniture in the
That's
room.
But you know, it
you
was
did
interesting
that
'cause
too?
Yeah.
tennis
Is that what
racket
you
on the
had?
bed?
Did you have the tennis racket?
Bioenergetics? You did bioenergetics?
No, it was Gestalt.
Oh,
Let's get our
Gestalt.
thing right. Bioenergetics was a whole nother piece of equipment. How were your parents?
Lovely.
Lovely. I thought so. Because you're a well-adjusted, you know, twinkler.
My mum's a wee darling.
Yeah.
She's lovely.
You're
I
a
said to her,
mommy's boy, aren't you?
yeah.
Yeah, you can
She
tell.
said to me the other day, I was in LA and I told her I was coming on this program. She went, "Oh, watch yourself now. Watch Ruby."
Because you'll have your
Yeah.
kilt off you in a minute. You have you dancing naked on the tabletops. But isn't it remarkable that you're, do you know what I mean, against all odds?
Yeah, I
like
mean,
this
sometimes
kind of, you know, cute Scots boy suddenly like is unleashed in Broadway. I mean, that's
oh, that is,
unbelievable.
yeah, that's pretty bonkers, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever picture like that would ever?
No.
I didn't even know you could sing.
Neither did I.
Can you sing?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean,
yes,
I
he
can.
can.
You've seen it?
Yes, he
Yeah.
was terrific.
Well, thanks.
Well,
I've just been
don't
at the
do
Hol-
that. Come on, you've been in enough talk
Oh,
shows.
shut up.
Take it and run, babe.
Thanks. But I was at the Hollywood Bowl last weekend,
As yourself?
singing as me, yeah,
Oh no.
with Ann Miller.
Oh my God.
Do you want to hear an Ann Miller
Oh,
story?
Ann
definitely. We
Miller?
want to hear about 5.
Ann
Who
Miller.
is Ann Miller?
Oh,
Ruby.
stop it.
Ruby.
I can ask. It's my
MGM
show.
legend.
Oh, right.
You know, she was in like Stage Door in 1902 or something, and everything.
Yeah.
And she
Great.
tap
She
dances.
tap
danced
dancer
away through
performer.
all
Like
the-
Ruby Keeler.
No, because
No.
Ruby Keeler had human hair.
That's
Ann
one of
Miller?
the stories.
And wasn't that as good a dancer as Ann Miller.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's done this. It's like guests of the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, and you sing this big orchestra. It's 18,000 people, right? And I was thinking, why am I doing this? It's so, what have I put myself through? But it was actually really good. I felt, now I think, wow, I did that. It's a really great thing to do.
Right,
you know?
right.
But anyway, Ann Miller, right? So she said to me, she said on the second night, she's really lovely. Just like about the same age as my granny. And she was on stage, she sang Chasing the Blues Away, which is, she sang in like 1906. And then she sang I'm Still Here, which is really good.
Almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Hanging.
And she's just fabulous. She had this big sparkly dress. And on the second night, we got on really well at the rehearsals and stuff. And I went into her dressing room to say hello. And I went, oh, hi, Anne, how are you tonight? She went, oh, Alan, I forgot to tell you, I loved you in Eyes Wide Shut. You were the best thing in that movie. And I was like, oh, thank you very much, Anne, that's really nice. But does that mean you didn't like the rest of the film? And she went, well, I think I'd like to see the European version, because apparently there's more pussy in it. And I was like, Ann Miller said pussy.
Did you meet Clinton?
No, because my plane was late and
Again, an airplane screwed you up.
God, yeah.
Why are we so thrilled to know that somebody met Clinton, who we don't want to like, but we're fascinated with?
I like him.
I did.
Have you met him?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And
well,
his wife.
I think they're
Met
great.
her.
who did
whole
you like
bunch of-
better? Like on a scale of what, you know, who is more popular to you?
Well, I felt more comfortable with her, with Hillary.
Right.
I've met her several times, so.
Is it a girl's girl?
No, I just love that. I love how knowledgeable she is.
She's
and-
very knowledgeable.
And how articulate she is, and how she's managed to handle everything and keep herself.
Yeah, how is she doing that? How do you think?
How do I think she's doing?
Drugs, I'd imagine.
No, I think she's incredibly honest with herself, and I think that's what it is. I don't think she goes into denial. I don't think she evades things. I think she lets herself feel everything that she feels, and so there's a process for her to evolve out of things and move through things.
But the control on the outside is remarkable.
Yeah.
You know, because if you carry something, you carry something. It doesn't matter how much you unleash in front of your therapist or your friends.
But
You
one
know.
time
Yeah, but
I
she
saw-
has to be controlled on the outside. She's in a situation
Yeah.
where she simply.
But how many
can't-
could you? I couldn't be controlled.
No, but would we get
all
into
know that.
get into that situation to begin with? I mean, the control had to begin 20 years ago on the road to the White House.
You
I
mean
mean,
she
that's-
knew already what the
Yeah,
rules were?
and it builds and builds and builds, and it becomes. It's like as an actor, you build skill, and finally, after 20 years, you have an enormous amount of experience and an enormous amount of craft. And I think being a politician
Yeah.
or a politician's wife is exactly the same thing.
Control doesn't
Yeah.
even begin. Control is almost a derogatory term. What she's able to do is really skillful. It's not. I think that's a very good analogy. She just doesn't control her feelings. She knows. It's almost as how there's a kind of evolving that happens to her, and she arrives at a place where she remains. She has a presence, and she's intact. That's what it is. She evolves no matter what happens to her. She somehow manages to again find her own intactness. Have you
To
ever?
me, it's like steel.
No, I know, but have you ever heard her? Have you been in a room with her
No.
when she's given a speech?
No.
Well, she is not steel. She is very vulnerable, very emotional, funny, spontaneous. Nothing is said. She doesn't read anything. Everything just comes from her. Now, you have to have, first, a lot of chutzpah to do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, there has to be a way in which you've survived yourself,
Yeah.
that is really phenomenal. And that's what you watch. I'm incredibly impressed with her.
Yeah, but
What
it's so
she's done.
it's so anti the image of what we have
Yeah, but
of people being in touch with their emotions. Is they emotionalize, especially this American
But that's
image,
such a false
all over
image.
the place.
It's
It's
such a
interesting.
sloppy-
It's the control that we should like learn from. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
nobody ever puts it like that.
And also, you can't be a politician's wife and be promiscuous
blab all
with
the
your
time.
with your feelings in front of a camera. You can privately or in a room
Do you think
with
in
people.
the
You can't.
American climate they would have wished that she would have broken down to give them the schmaltz that they so yearn for?
But
You know,
no,
America really wants shtick.
But I
No,
think they do this
no,
thing-
they didn't want that. What happened was I think she really helped the situation and helped him tremendously by the fact that she maintained her own sense of self. And I think that there were many people felt really impressed with that and moved by that she didn't dump on him, that she didn't come out and say outrageously supportive things about it.
But but every hand motion was scrutinized by the
Yeah.
press. It was astonishing. There was
Yeah.
one point where he went to touch her and she slightly pulled her hand
Yeah.
away. It was
Oh,
front page news.
I know, yeah.
Maybe she had an itch or something. I mean, it didn't have to be what it looked like. And it was so she's
What they made of it,
undersub-
at
what
least.
they made of it. And so the pressure is unbelievable. I can't
was
think
a
of any
weird-
other couple.
No, but then you
under the
yearn
same
for
kind
it too. You know, it's like saying somebody who's on the foreign news desk is brave. They yearn for war. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
yearn for the excitement. So it's their idea of a good time too, or that's what they work their lives for. They have the muscles for it. You don't just wake up and you're the president's wife.
I think that one of the things that has happened is, as much as we've talked about Monica and the president, we've never really talked about what it is in our society that makes a young girl think that that the way she can find some self-respect, some value, is to go to Washington and put her knee pads on. I'm quoting her directly. And what is that in our society? What does it mean about the way men and women really kind of function with each other? And what is it that a man, one of the things that men want, I think, in that power structure, is to feel that a woman is so driven by passion for them. And so the role emerges and she plays out that role. What's interesting about that is not that specific role. What's interesting is that women are constantly reaching for the fantasy image that a man has and trying to exploit it and please it so as not to be without a man, because if you're without a man, that means that you have very little value. Now, we don't talk about that in the United States. We don't discuss that. We can discuss endlessly, he lied, he lied, he lied. And who's constantly talking about he lied, he lied, he lied? The other men in the men's club are constantly talking about he lied, he lied, he lied. Whereas I'm much more interested about the what is that relationship between men and women. That is the thing. This was an opportunity for us. I'm screaming now, but this was an opportunity for us to really confront this, and very few people did, and very few people would.
Yeah, but that is the American, we'll never confront the real issue. We just go for the headline.
Well, I don't think that's particularly American. I don't think that this thing between men and women
that's true.
unfortunately, is all over the planet, and in some cases is dangerous to the physical health and welfare of women. I mean, God knows it's dangerous to mental. And not only just for women, it's not healthy for men.
Let me ask you, considering you're in the public eye,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you're a butch male.
No.
Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that's kind of refreshing, don't you, that such a female man
In touch with my feminine side.
indefinitely is, being is in the public eye, he's getting a career, whereas when would that have been?
Yeah, that's not a
Ever.
fad. That's not a trend. That's something that's happened very slowly through the last 20 years.
You wouldn't have
Fads
been
go
around
like
in
that.
in the 50s, would they?
No. Oh, in
No.
the 50s.
Oh, he would have
absolutely
been
not.
tortured against a
Yes,
tree.
yeah.
I'm not really interested in playing the kind of parts that you have to be sort of all manly, and I'm not going to be in an action film. Or if I am, I'm going to be like the sort of slimy villain or the kind of weirdo friend. But I think as well in America it's really fascinating being European. Already you're much more exotic and you're much more interesting, and in a way you're able to be yourself more than you are in Europe, actually.
That's, I think, very true.
Yeah, they expect European men to be more in touch with their femininity.
Oh,
for some
really?
reason.
Yeah.
they do,
Cookie
don't
and,
they?
and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's how you get away with it. Being Greek, do you feel you have an outsider point of view in America?
I always feel on the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
feel like a hyphenated person, Greek hyphen American. Yet I don't feel at home in Greece,
Yeah.
you know.
We
so-
have no home.
No, that's it.
Were you like beat up as a kid for being a minority? I was beat up.
Yeah, well, there
Sounds
were
gay.
many fights in the street, but I have to say I was pretty aggressive, and I didn't get beaten up that much. I did a lot of it myself.
Did you take them on?
You bet.
But it's great to be on the outside.
Is it? I don't know.
Oh, I think it is.
Maybe there's a joy in not belonging, to quote Martin Sherman in the Rose, from Rose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think there is. I think I think you have an extremely healthy perspective on everything else, and I think
Because you live here. I mean,
Yeah.
do you feel at home here?
I feel completely at home. But I know that this isn't. I feel completely at home because I know that I'm not English, or that I'm not British, and
So you think
that
they let
helps.
you like come?
Well,
to
for
all-
one thing, here specifically, if it's a very specific situation here because I never ever have to deal with class, which is what destroys emotionally everybody in this country. People treat me as an American. That's all.
They hate you for that.
The hatred of an American is nothing compared to the hatred of the many levels of the class system. I mean, all they know is that my parents were American. They have no idea where they were from. As it happens, my parents were Russian peasants. But there's no
There's
no
no
awareness
sign
of
of it on you.
Yeah. Really? I have to try. But so it's actually very easy to live in this country if you're not British, and very difficult if you are.
Do you feel like you're looked down upon in England, being a Scots?
Yeah, I do.
Are you still?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's kind of so as simple as that, but it's been a weird thing going to America and working so much in America, like going to another foreign country, because you know I lived in Glasgow and I was at drama school, then I moved to London, and it really was, you know, you're emigrating. It's only a little bit up the road, but it's a huge cultural difference. And like what I loved about when I went to New York was that everyone's different there. Everyone's an oddball, and so it's like you know you fit in. In London, every single day when I was here, I'd be reminded that I was different. Someone would impersonate my accent. Someone would say something like jock or something like that. You know, this kind of like, you know, insidious kind of slightly racist sort of thing that, or you know, you just are reminded all the time that you don't belong. And I like that in America, but here it riles me.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it riles me in America.
Yeah, it was very
It's
strange.
funny.
Yeah.
You
Me
hear
too.
subtle.
Yeah.
You hear subtle racist comments here all the time,
Yeah.
and yet England is probably the most racially complete and together of any country in Europe, and in some ways has America beat. And yet you hear intelligent people make comments here that you would never hear.
Like?
Well, for instance, I've always heard anti-Semitic comments here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they hate you. They may let you hear as like, you know, you've got no class, but they hate your Jewishness.
No, they don't hate it.
They
look
embrace
upon
it?
They look upon it as different, and they have a certain disdain for difference. But it's not hatred. Whereas in America,
No.
there's hatred. It's very complicated. The differences.
This is
people
like
here,
the thing Helen Mirren said in the newspaper that I reacted to.
Which
Well,
is
Isn't it?
what?
Yeah.
She was an interview and she was talking about American and English actors, and she was saying, well, American actors act with their hands, whereas the British and English actors act with their facial expressions, with their voices. Yeah, I know. So I thought, well, you know, how inappropriate, she should have blah, blah, blah. At any rate, I realized, I mentioned it to Martin, and then I had to admit that it hurt me. And I
Did she
thought,
really say that, or was that
yes,
just,
yes,
she did?
Yeah. So I said it, and Martin said, well, maybe she was misquoted, taken out of context, et cetera, et cetera. But eventually what became important was for me how I responded to it, whatever her intention was whenever she said it, was that I said to Martin, well, who uses their hands, Martin? And he said right away, Jews.
Jews,
And I said, who else uses their hands?
Italians.
Greeks, Spanish. I said, this is a very subtle racist remark, and she probably doesn't even know it. But for myself, I said it's like an old cud that comes up in America. As you, when you said that, you feel it very strongly in America. That came up, it's a kind of like a burp from the past.
Yeah, yeah.
And I felt it. I felt the slight.
Yeah. When do you still feel slighted from the past?
Well, whenever somebody says I'm too ethnic for something.
Oh, they still say that?
Oh, yes. I think that, for example, if my name, you know, was Elizabeth Anderson, they wouldn't be set up for that. And I had an agent at the very beginning when I came to New York who told me to change my name, but I was, you know, couldn't. I had those fights in the streets. There were too many of those fights in the streets defending my name, and anybody made fun of my name and blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't do it. I was just, it just felt so disloyal to do it. I couldn't, maybe. If I was second generation, but I was first generation, so I couldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
you think you would have been, like,
Oh, yeah.
discovered earlier if you had changed your name to what,
Oh, well, things would have
Anderson?
been easier, no question about it.
Really?
Yeah, because people would say, Olympia Dukakis, what is she? She has an accent. Does she have an accent? I mean, we were into things that had nothing to do with my acting.
Yeah.
That's another thing that gets me, this accent thing. Like, I go in America and they say things like, oh, I love your accent. I mean, they're nice about it, that, you know, like, whereas, you know, when I first
And
moved
they
to-
do love it, too.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, when I first moved to England, it's sort of, like, people would say, oh, you should tend to be English when you go for a meeting if you're going to play an English person.
Yeah, they told me that too, and it worked.
It does work, but it's not sad. Sad.
It is, but again.
But I mean, why
it is-
you? That it's like seen as something bad to have, you know, a region. That's what I think, a regional accent.
Sure,
That
but
really
what
gets
you
on my
do, don't
nerves.
you think, is like a Zelig thing, we'll get back to this, is that just fake it for a while, and then, you know, when you win your Oscar, get up there and go, you know what my name really is?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's nice, but then
You
you, have to
couldn't
have
go
a bit of
down,
power
could
in
you?
there.
You're too
hard.
tough
You
a
see,
cookie.
Once you start that lying,
Yeah. it
then
goes-
you lie in your work.
That way,
It's
madness lies. in
very
every
hard.
area.
It's
Right.
not for Martin to lie about who he is not helpful.
Yeah, you were saying about your work that you have to stay honest.
You have to.
Do you think you would have been more successful if you wrote a little more
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you would
Absolutely.
have had more money.
But I would certainly have had more money. But it's a question of doing what you know how to do. I met once with a producer in America who was telling me about a series he was developing, about a film. And he said, you know, we really want to do a human story here, a human story. Because in the past...
This is L.A. talk.
This is LA. In the past, you know...
What else was there? Dog stories?
No, but no, he said, no, in the past...
Horse talking horses?
Yeah. He said in the
Sure.
past,
There's
been an alien as
no,
well.
you're almost. He said we might do something about a man and his monkey, you know, and have all kinds of special effects. But
I think
we
I've
don't
done
want
that.
that. We don't want that anymore. Now we want to know, and he really said this: what makes that monkey tick?
You went book me. Book me. Alan worked with a
Sometimes I can't
monkey.
even laugh at
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
I just,
In Buddy, the
In
film?
Buddy, I
Has
do it.
Buddy come here?
Buddy hasn't been released in this country.
Will it be
I
released?
think perhaps it's available on video. But it's
And you
not-
worked as a chimpanzee trainer?
That's right, Ruby, yeah.
Yes, I've done my research.
Yeah, I had 4 chimps in my guard. And it's great. I loved it. I really loved it. I had to train with the chimps. And then, you know, every day on the set, I was the only person allowed to touch the chimps. And I can see you're going to come up with something.
No, I'm listening.
It was great. I had this great time. It's like being a nanny. I mean, it was like having kids, but they were chimps. But it was really weird. I got so into those chimps. I really loved them. And I actually thought, you know, I wanted to have a chimp of my own. And all my friends here were going, oh, fuck, he's really lost it. And then one
I'm sure
day...
there's a woman who'll carry one for you.
You can adopt. And then I was driving out of the car park one day going home, and I saw the chimps trailer where they were kept, and one of them was having its nappy changed, and it was like I had the back view, and I just thought, oh, what am I thinking of? That was just so... And because they also want my favourite chimp, his favourite food was vegetable burritos from Taco Bell.
Oh, bad nappy stuff.
Oof.
And then it sent you pictures, didn't it? Tango?
Tonka.
Tonka.
Yeah.
Ellie Cummings.
You've kept up a correspondence.
I did for a wee while. No, I did for a wee while. Oh, Jesus, that's how
Go with it, Alan. Come on, flow with the flow.
He was really, you know, he was such a lovely wee chimp, and he really got attached to me. Like, you know how kids get attached to you, and when you give them back to their mum, they're like, yeah. All that was happening, and when makeup people came to my makeup, he nearly went for them and stuff like that. He got really protective of me, and he was kind of old for a chimp in films. And then
There's an age limit?
yeah, because
There were
of
no
what I'm
roles
about
for
to
chimps
say.
over 40.
No, it's to do with the downstairs business. And what happened was
Well,
like,
they're wearing nappies anyway. What's the difference?
Ruby, you don't want to go there. But I came back the
I
year.
think she does.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
came
a whole
back-
that's a show on its own.
I came back the year later to do the press tour, and they said, and I was meeting this. I went to talk to this chimp because I had to do photos with
You
chimps.
talked to the chimp?
Well, you know, I went to meet one to sort of be used to me when I did the photos
Right.
with it and stuff. And I kept saying, "Where's Tonka? Why can't I see it?" And they went, "Tonka's fine." Like that. It was all this going on. What's happening? And I went to this chat show thing, and they came in to me and said, "We're so sorry about Tonka." And I was like, "What's wrong with him? What do you mean?" And they went, "Well, we wanted to reunite you live on air with Tonka on this chat show." And it was something really tacky. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like not a kind of, you know, it wouldn't have been a kind of kooky weird thing. It was kind of like, you know, Richard and Judy's kind of thing. So you can imagine if this had happened, how awful it would be. But Tonka had become sexually aggressive because he'd gone from like 4.5 to 5.5, and over at that time when you're a chimp, you start getting, you know,
Testosterone.
yeah, and because he like was so attracted to me,
That would have been. I would have booked
oh,
it
he would have shagged me basically. That was on
on the
thing.
show live.
And they're strong, you know, they're strong.
You would have had to be taken.
I know. Well, for the cameras. But
So did
yeah.
you ever see Tonka secretly?
No, I never did.
You gotta ask.
Or email
You don't
each
ask,
other.
you don't get. But he's been stalked.
Have you?
Yeah.
Really?
I know it's not amusing.
No, it's not actually. I know.
But he's been
Really?
stalked.
You've been
Sorry, I had the wrong
stalked?
expression on his
Yeah.
face. So was that a terrible? No, who was stalking you?
A variety of people.
A variety of
people?
people.
Yes.
New York.
In New York.
Because of what?
Because of cabaret and the part and the way I think I was perceived in.
Because you were
because of that.
shaking your fanny a little too much.
Shaking my fanny, and the part was, you know,
So dark.
so dark and so sort of sexually available, and it kind of sort of churned up things for people, and so people were very, you know, overly familiar with me and when I was out in public and stuff, and people
Really?
became quite obsessive, and then
Like you'd see the same people in the audience once or twice?
Yeah.
Same people. Would you
Same.
know who was the sickie in the audience?
well, there was various levels of it. Like there was people who would be outside the stage door all the time, and they were, you know, obviously quite obsessive. And then there was, and that was, so it was like sort of, it was three things. Like, you know, going out in New York started to get really difficult because I would get sort of trapped by people, or, you know, touched by people. that
Saying
just,
what?
Just want to talk to me and you know, and saying stuff. I mean, like nice things, but to do with sort of what, you know, fancying you or stuff about how you were on the plane, and getting, and that becoming kind of difficult just on a day-to-day basis. So it was that. Then there was
Did
like
anybody wait outside your house?
yeah, that's when it started to get horrible. And then there was the obsessive people outside. Then there's people who pretended to know me to try and get backstage and try and get into my dressing room all the time. And then mail started to come. And then the worst thing, people would follow me home, and then people would call someone got my number and would call and leave messages on the machine saying really horrible things. I mean,
Like,
like how they wanted to shag me and stuff like that.
that's really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to get a bodyguard, and I had to move house. I had to
And
move
that's
house.
expensive.
Yeah, I wasn't paying.
How
for
much
that.
is, oh, yeah, well, charge you too.
Yeah.
When Bent was on Broadway, Richard Gere was the star, and he had to have a bodyguard. And at first I thought, why is this? You know, well, it was really, really necessary, and it was strange. One time, the bodyguard came in the dressing room, and a lot of people were sitting around the dressing room, including Richard's girlfriend and a whole group of people. And the bodyguard said, "There's a woman here who went to high school with you, and her name is such and so, and she'd really like to see you." And Richard said, "Well, I don't remember the name, but you know, I don't. Well, bring her up." And this woman came up, and she was beautifully dressed. I mean, really well groomed, and she looked, you know, very rather sophisticated. And Richard looked at her and said, "I don't know you. We weren't at high school together, were we?" She said, "No, I want to fuck you." The room just turned ice.
You
it
were
was
there?
so yeah. It was very frightening. You know, he said, "I think you better leave." It was something
'Cause what's-
so.
Thank you.
I had weird things like people would do, you know, went on the Rosie O'Donnell show, and then about a few nights later, and I would always have security outside my dressing room because sometimes people would try and who knew other members of the cast would come into the theatre and then order to try and get into my room, and then I had the people said, "Oh, it's the producers from Rosie O'Donnell are here to see you," and I was like, "Oh." And then they checked her name, and it was the same. I looked on the bit of paper; it was the same name. And I came into these sort of people came in, and I was like, And you know, you meet so many people when you do those programs. You don't sort of.
You don't register.
No.
But do they think that when you see them, you'll want to have sex with them? I mean, what's
Well,
the
that's
thing?
the thing, Ruby. You don't. I mean, I don't know kind of what.
Like,
They're
what's their
they're
reality?
not reasonable.
They don't
when
kind
And
of-
they're-
because
also,
when
it
they
can
get
flip
so
over
near-
to aggression very, very
Yeah,
carefully.
exactly.
Yeah.
When they get so near you, they're in such a state that you don't know what they'll do, and that's what's really. You know, if you're standing beside someone who's shaking because they have met you, and it's really scary. And they came into the room, and
Are you thrilled too, in a way, in the beginning? Are you, you know?
No.
Because you know that you're fulfilling a fantasy. They're just a
Yeah. It's
character
nothing to do
in
with
their
you.
drama.
Exactly.
You're not
And
not
the-
yourself.
And what was scary about some of those things was that, you know, Carmine was my bodyguard's name. He's really lovely. And he was in the room, and they came in and they went, "Is that your security guy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they went, "Can he go outside?" And I was like, "No." They went, "Well, can he stand over there?" And I was like, "No." And they went, "We're not from Rosie O'Donnell. We just love you." And I was thinking, what would they have done if he had gone out of the room? There was 3 big women, and you know, I was pretty scared. And just all that sort of stuff is. And then you start to feel. I went to this really weirdy phase because, you know, I had to be. Until I went to bed, I had to be like protected. And for the time when the phone calls were coming to my house and to my dressing room, you feel so invaded, and then you think, oh, and any kind of abuse in a way, you have this thing that you bring it back onto yourself, and you think, oh, it's my fault. I have done in playing this character and in being myself and being out in New York and being famous. I am sending out a message which encourages people to do this. So therefore, it's my. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Oh,
you'd have to
that's what women
personalize
think
it.
all the time.
Are you stalked, Martin?
Oh, constantly. No, you know, the wonderful thing about writers is
Your
that
zealot
nobody...
thing I want to hear about.
Oh, that's really great. Are
Martin
you going
says
to
he
tell
has a
them?
zealot complex.
He does.
I've had Zelig experiences. You know Zelig, the Woody Allen film.
Uh-huh.
All of my life. When I was in college, there was the first march on Washington for civil rights. It was the first time in America that they ever had anything like this. And it was like 1 million people finally went to Washington. And I was with a friend of mine from college, and we wanted to go, and we didn't know how to go. And we found out that the day before the march, Actors Equity agreed to, they were afraid to go on this march because, you know, it was scary in those days. But they agreed to get a bus. So we got onto this bus. We were the last people to arrive. And we got to Washington, and it was an actress, it was a character actress named Madeline Sherwood. And she greeted the bus and looked at everybody on the bus and got 2 big guys. And she took them with her, and they had a banner. And we saw the banner was going all the way in the distance and up to the Lincoln Memorial, was where the speakers were. We're at the very end of the march. So my friend and I, Barbara, and I are standing there at the very end of the march, listening to all these speeches. 1 million people were there. Suddenly, these 2 policemen come, and the crowds part like the Red Sea, and they're marching through the crowds, and Madeline Sherwood is in the middle of them. And she sees us, and she goes, "Them, those 2." And the policeman said, "Come here, come here." And Barbara and I sort of walk, you know, behind the policeman and Madeline Sherwood. We have no idea, we're kids. And suddenly we're walking up steps, and we don't know what's going on. And I turn around to help Barbara, and I said, there were 1 million people are beneath us. We were on the Lincoln Monument. And we get to the top of the platform, and Madeline says, "We didn't have any representatives of equity here." We were kids. We were on the bus by accident. And they come and they take us to a seat. And as I sit down over here, right over there, Martin Luther King walks to the podium and says, "I had a dream."
Oh my God.
The most famous speech in American history, except for the Gettysburg Address. And I'm this little kid from New Jersey, and I was sort of sitting on the podium watching this.
God, that's
Can't
amazing.
believe it. That was my first Zelig experience.
Thank you.
Ish.
Thank you.
Is that finished now?
Yeah. So what was, no, I never got, I didn't do those.
Well, if you've stayed up late talking, don't go yet. There's comedy with Seinfeld next.